Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is Hugh Johnson, and Hugh is a retired meteorologist, and he's going to talk about Hurricane Ian, which landed last week. So, this was one of the most devastating storms, right, to hit the American shore. Tell us about it.
Okay, hi, Cynthia, and good afternoon or whatever. Yeah, Ian was definitely a bad boy. At least the fifth most destructive storm in history, and they're still tallying up the damages. It's going to take weeks to really fully assess the damage it caused. The problem was the tidal surge. That was what really did the damage. I mean, you had the winds, you had tornadoes, you had 10 inches or more of rain, but the tidal surge of 15 feet above normal is what is a true killer in a hurricane like this. And there are still places that are submerged that probably have bodies that you couldn't even get to yet. And forget trying to assess the full extent of the damage until they get to that point. But it's going to be in the billions. It could exceed $10 billion of damage easily. Florida, of course, the price of everything has gone up too, and you can imagine what this is going to do to insurance down there.
So, you've been a meteorologist for a number of years, right? And you've
That's
been
correct.
and you've been watching storms throughout your career. Have the storms been getting increasingly more deadly?
Yes, I would say for several reasons. One of which is they're building more and more in hurricane prone areas. Uh, they still continue to build where they know that a hurricane could level the ground with the tidal surge. They have better protection against wind. They really have since Andrew. Andrew was a game changer too back in 1992. That one was a more of a wind maker than anything else, but it's a very bad one at that. But anyways, and also because of climate change and because of warmer waters, they are more destructive. They have more power, more juice to them. The hurricanes, and the figure is at least 10% more with rain, and at least that with the power of the storm. This storm revved up from a tropical storm to a category 4 in like 48 hours. That's pretty impressive. Wilma did that in back in '05 within a day, but it's definitely we are seeing stronger storms because of the climate change. Maybe not more, but stronger ones. Yes.
So, in 2005, there was Katrina that hit Louisiana. Is Ian worse than Katrina?
I don't know what the final assessment. Probably not. Only because the fact that they had you had that the breach of the levees and they killed thousands of people. So that probably will make Katrina worse. But in terms of damage, probably very similar. Yeah.
Okay. I don't see your face, you. There
No,
you,
I'm sorry. I had unfortunately my yeah. I'm still here.
there
I'm
you
still
go,
here.
right there.
Yeah. Sorry, I had to do something there. Yeah.
So, will the hurricane, at, at the rate we're going now, and people talk about climate change.
Yes.
Will will the hurricanes get more deadly as we go along?
Yes. That would be the theory. Absolutely, because we're still putting in a ton of CO2 into the atmosphere, metric tons of the CO2 in the atmosphere. That's still not changing. I mean, we're talking about reducing the CO2 footprint, but it's really not, it's going down a little, but not enough. So we're going to continue to warm things. We're going to continue to warm the oceans, and that will make storms stronger. Now, that said, we start October off cool. Everyone's saying, well, what global warming? It feels like November out here. Guess what? That was from Fiona, the previous storm. It went up to Greenland, and I really believe that it helped to push a lot of cold air out of Greenland back over us. That's why we're cool. So that storm actually was another very powerful storm that caused an indirect change in our temperatures here in early October.
So, what do you foresee in the future if the hurricanes keep getting more deadly? What's the ultimate outcome of all of this horrific weather?
Well, I think In the short term, I think there's going to be a real problem with insurance claims because insurance companies won't be able to keep up with the costs. I mean, again, we talked about this in the beginning of the show that hurricanes are there's property. We all know how exponentially expensive it's gotten, and they keep building there, and these storms keep destroying, and we keep getting title surges. Eventually, it's going to put a breach on the insurance companies, and that's going to cause all kinds of problems. I'm not going to forecast exactly what, but it won't be pretty. Um, that happened in 0405 that actually the value in Florida of property went down sharply because remember all the hurricanes that hit back there was a whole bunch of them in the 2 year period, and that just put insurance companies out of business or they didn't want to touch Florida. And I could see that happening again, not only in Florida but in the Carolinas and other places that are prone to hurricanes. We could get involved in one. We lucked out with Ian. We never got a drop with it here because that trough I told you about kind of plunged down and swept it out to sea. So we never got any. All the thing we got were pretty sunsets from Ian here in the capital region. But yeah, Florida, it's a horrible situation, and we're not done with the assessment yet. And by the way, more people can get killed after the storm than you think. Why? Because you got electrical wires down, you got weak structures. They don't realize that roofs have gotten weak, and they go in and they do something, and the roof can collapse on them. It's not many people, but sometimes you do get deaths after the storm.
So, when it goes out to sea, like it hit land, then it went out to sea, does it die at sea? What happens when a hurricane dwindles away?
Well, it doesn't always dwindle away. That's a very good question, though. That's an excellent question. In the case of Fiona, it went up to Greenland and it produced a very powerful storm in Nova Scotia. It was at that point. Now, what happens is a hurricane has a warm core. It's a tropical system. When it gets into the mid latitude, it goes through a transition, becomes a cold core storm. So a lot of times these storms end up being powerful even in the mid latitudes, even though they're not hurricanes. Sandy, by the way, when it did all its devastation, was technically not a hurricane. By the time it hit Jersey, it was considered cold core. So, but it still continues to produce. So they become absorbed in the mid latitude, and then eventually they become basically a mid latitude storm, and then they eventually wear out. But they can still continue to cause damage before that happens, and people don't realize that sometimes they don't. Sometimes say hurricanes dissipate before that happens, but that's pretty rare. Usually it ends up in the mid latitude somewhere as a mid latitude storm.
So, is Ian history now?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's out in the Atlantic. It's been whisked out. What it's done though, it's left some energy and some vorticity. We call it. It's going to be another storm coming up the coast tomorrow. A mid latitude storm that was kind of like a spin off, a little secondary of it, and that's going to cause some rain. Not any damage, but just more rain for the coast and give us a little more wind and clouds. But no, Ian's gone. Ian's basically history now.
So, what's the name of the next storm?
I have to tell you, it's an H. I'm not sure. Hermine. Oh, it's Hermine. That's right. It's Hermine. I think that one already came and went. I think that might have already happened. There was a brief spin up in the Atlantic, way out in the Eastern Atlantic. Right now, the tropics don't look all that exciting. We are getting later in the season, but we probably shouldn't let our guard down. We can still technically we got Sandy in late October, so we still got plenty of time. But right now, it's quieted down a little bit again.
So, is Ian worse than Sandy was when it hit Jersey and New York?
Yes. See, okay, let me again explain the difference. Ian was a Category 4, almost a Category 5 hurricane when it hit Florida. It was a pure hurricane. Sandy had been a hurricane, a Category 3 out in the Atlantic. When it got captured by a strong upper level low and then slammed into the Jersey coast, it was technically barely a hurricane. However, because of the way the orientation of it, the combination with the I believe full moon and things like that, it caused, of course, we know the devastation it caused. It hit a very expensive area. So yeah, Sandy was huge, but it was not a huge hurricane. It was not a category. It was barely a hurricane, and technically it was an extra tropical storm right after it hit land. So there were differences in it, but again, we're mixing apples and oranges a little bit. But they were both destructive storms in different ways.
Okay. I know I have friends on Long Island that their homes were uh, almost ruined by it.
Oh
But
yeah,
so, what do you
it's all
for?
about the tidal surge. There was a big tidal surge with Sandy too, and that's the tidal surge is the killer. That's the worst thing about a hurricane usually.
So, what do you forecast for the future as far as hurricanes are concerned?
Well, again, I'm not going to. I think the rest of the year we'll probably see a couple more. I don't think we'll see a lot more, but again, I can't tell you whether one's going to be as powerful as another. But we certainly could have another bad storm to deal with this year. I'd say the odds probably are a little less than half and half, but it's certainly not zero. But in the future, I think they're just going to get stronger. I mean, we were lucky this year in that we had a lot of dry air come off the Sahara that really suppressed the tropical activity throughout much of the hurricane season, but it finally died out and we finally started ramping up. We'll have to see what the teleconnections are with El Nino or La Nina. It was a La Nina this year, and that usually favors a active hurricane season in the Atlantic. But we're going to have more storms. We're going to have worse storms in the future because the Earth is still warming overall, and we're going to see stronger and stronger storms. So I don't think it's a good forecast. We might luck out some one year and get away with it, but in the end of the day or the end of the decade, we're going to see more powerful storms.
So, if Florida was a cold state and they got snow rather than rain, what would the snowfall accumulations have been with Ian?
Well, again, we'll just you've just taken the math of 12 to 1, the 12 inches of snow to 1 inch of rain, they would have had like 10 feet of snow. But again, you don't get that kind of moisture when it's that cold. So I mean, but if that were snow, that we'd be up. We would have been covering buildings in it. It would have been crazy. But thankfully, you don't in a snowstorm, you don't get those kind of liquid amounts because you don't have tropical air usually in play, that kind of thing. But it would have been a ton of snow.
So we live in New York.
Yeah.
Do you forecast the snowy season?
Well, here's my thinking. I was just talking to a friend about it. I told you about Fiona. It seemed to change the whole circulation of the right now for the northern hemisphere, at least temporarily. If we can hold this pattern throughout the winter, it's going to be cold and probably snowy. I don't know whether it's going to do that, but my gut feeling is we've had 3 years of below normal snow, even though we had two of those 3 years. We had big snowstorms in December. The rest of the winter was wimpy. I think this year we're going to be above normal. If I had to take a guess, I'd say above normal for snow, and we might get a couple of good ones too. So I think we're due, and B, this blocking thing that Fiona's created, that could stick around. We'll have to see how that goes. But boy, I'll tell you, it really changed the whole atmosphere circulation in the last couple of weeks.
When you say a good snowstorm, how many inches do you anticipate?
A foot or more. I usually consider a foot of, one of, usually in Albany, anything over a foot becomes noteworthy. It's pretty big. It's in Philly, where I came from in Philly, 7 inches was considered big, but up here, I'd say a foot or more.
Okay. So as the winter approaches and we get snow and it's it's a bad storm, would you come back on issues that matter to talk about the snowstorms?
Absolutely. As long as you don't mind the fact that I might be in Florida. I remember a few years ago, I was down walking in Myrtle Beach and it was in the 60s, and you guys were about to get raked with a snowstorm. So I'll be
Right.
happy anytime. But I will tell you right now, I'm a snowbird. I do not like winter. So I will be heading south for a little
Wow.
bit.
Okay, so you've been listening to Hugh Johnson. This is Issues That Matter. And if you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks you. Thank you everybody for listening. Have a great day.
You too, Cynthia.